Right.
Um, So everybody, welcome to this ASCILITE Learning Analytics SIG. I'm Cassandra Colvin and I work at the University of Queensland. Throughout this year, the Learning Analytics SIG, which comprises myself, Linda Corrin and Hazel Jones, and from this week, Shreko Joksimovic from UniSA, we've been sort of exploring the theme of what we call learning-centred analytics. So we just wanted to have conversations and get people to think and talk and look at research that was occurring and practice in the space of really aligning learning analytics to learning, and within that exploring the different ways that people are understanding, constructing, conceptualizing what learning is, because I think that that's the big part of this puzzle. And anyway, early this year I came across a paper from 2018. It's actually from a conference in Europe, Lifelong Technology Enhanced Learning. And it was a paper by Justian Knobbout, who is our speaker today, and it was actually called Where is the Learning in Learning Analytics? And it is a lovely paper and I recommend it to people to read. It's a lovely, rigorous piece where Justian did a lot of work with his systematic analysis of the literature to look at what learning analytics research was focusing on that was learning sort of related, and using a conceptual framing of learning that Justian and his co-researcher developed, sort of looking at perhaps future opportunities for learning analytics in the future. And that was a big motivator to invite Justian to speak now. So we've seen the bio on Justian, but he works in Holland, and I haven't got on your bio your university, Justian. What university are you at?
Well, I'm with the HU University of Applied Sciences in Utrecht, in the middle of the Netherlands.
Yes.
And
very good.
Well, quite a large university, around 30,000 students. So yeah, we have quite a dense student population and therefore quite a lot of student data.
Lovely. And I also see that you're chairman of the Dutch Special Interest Group for Learning Analytics, which we should try and have some conversations with you about moving forward. Anyway, I'll ask you, Justian, to start your presentation, and thank you very much for speaking with us.
All right, thank you, Cassandra, for your introduction. So my name is Justian Knobbout, so I'm from the Netherlands. And I'm researching learning analytics. And the title of today's presentation is Where is the Learning in Learning Analytics? And that seems like a trivial question, but unfortunately it's not, because much of the learning analytics literature and research is mostly technology driven and not so much from a student perspective or a teacher perspective, so not so much from the personal side of things. So yeah, I'm doing a PhD research, and this question came up and we had to provide an answer before I could go any further with my my research. All right, well, Cassandra already introduced me, but my personal background actually is in business engineering and supply chain management. And I think that really reflects the multidisciplinary approach of learning analytics. Many of us do not have a master or PhD in pedagogy or higher ed. But most of us come from a computer science background or a data science background. So, and that also shows that, yeah, learning might be a bit, overwhelmed by this data-driven approach. Anyway, I'm doing my PhD research towards the more organizational perspective. But nonetheless, I try to touch upon all those different domains as well. I'm a lecturer in business engineering, and as Cassandra mentioned, I'm the chairman of the Dutch Special Interest Group Learning Analytics. And as a special interest group, we try and foster sharing knowledge and experiences about learning analytics in our institutions in the Netherlands. So we try to set up workshops like this one, or even more practical-oriented workshops. How do you implement your own learning analytics, in which we help institutions, higher educational institutions, to set up their own learning analytics environment and benefit students and teachers with that. So some of the content of today's presentation. Well, first I give a very brief history of learning analytics at the HU University of Applied Sciences, because from that history my PhD research emerged. But later on we will go further, and we will try and look how learning analytics actually improves learning. And more importantly, how do you measure that learning analytics affected your learning? So learning analytics, as you might know, it's the measurement, collection, analysis, and reporting of data about learners and their context for purposes of understanding and optimizing learning and the environment in which it occurs. And I highlighted here the learning and the environment, because that actually is the point. You try to optimize the learning. But what is learning? I mean, there are different perspectives on that, and when you look at definitions of learning, then different researchers have different perspectives and different definitions. Some of them say, well, learning is about an outcome, and others say, well, learning is about a process. But we should always look about, make sure we optimize learning. And often it's more data-driven. As I said, it's more technology-driven. We have a pile of data. Let's do some analysis with it. Let's see what comes out, and maybe we can do something with it to enhance the learning process or the learning environment. But always remember that it is about learning. So how does it work in practice? Well, this cycle of Doc Law, it's very often used. And learners, they generate data. This data you can collect, and then you can analyze it based on certain metrics. And then you want to perform an intervention. And you always want to perform an intervention, because when you stop at metrics, when you stop at just analyzing data but don't do anything with it, well, then you're not optimizing the learning. So make sure there's always an intervention. And after the intervention, well, hopefully learners, well, they have different learning behaviors, or you can see a change in their learning approach, or you can see a change in, I don't know, grades they get, or so you can measure that as well. So it really is a cycle. But again, I mean, without intervention, it's not learning analytics, because then you're not really optimizing the learning. So some about the learning analytics at HU University of Applied Sciences here in Utrecht. This is a dashboard we used to analyze and to show what students did in a certain course. And this is a statistics course I teach. And from the special interest group, we got this opportunity to use a plug and play learning analytics system. So we only had to post some HTML code on our learning environment, or digital learning environment, or LMS. And then the system started to collect data and show it in the dashboard you see here. And that's great. I mean, plug and play. I mean, it can't get any easier than that. But we ran in a lot of problems. I mean, first of all, the privacy regulation in Europe is quite strict. So we had to ask all those students are we allowed to collect your data for this and this purpose, and we're going to do this and that with it, and you can get insight in your own data at any point of time. So yeah, we had to make sure those privacy regulations were followed. But there was also the technical side. Not everybody is allowed to post HTML code on the LMS. So we had many problems, and eventually the project was almost terminated because we couldn't overcome those problems. But we managed to collect some data, and the outcomes were well, as you can see, not many students access the video, and you might say, well, that's a problem. I mean, let's try and make sure that that more students look at the videos. But when you think about it further, that's not really the case, because in this course, the videos were just providing some background information, not really necessary for the students to really understand the course materials and get a good grade at their test. So when I show this dashboard to people, they say, oh, the videos are not looked at well, so how can we optimize that? But, well, we shouldn't. I mean, it's not really necessary for the learning process. And that also shows the problem with many of the visualizations. You draw conclusions from them, but without the contextual knowledge, those conclusions might be wrong. So always be aware of that. And a different problem was that only we had like over 200 students, and as you can see, only 90 students give their consent to collect data, and later on we analyzed what students did give consent, and those were the higher performing students, so the above average performing students. So this data is also biased in some way. There is some self-selection bias. So because we had those problems, we thought, well, how do we overcome these in the future? And that's the aim of my PhD research. So we try to enable students and teachers to benefit from learning analytics. And as I said, I have a background in business engineering, so I take a more organizational perspective on this. I will share some of the results, but later on we will move forward and look into the learning process. So the hypothesis is that as an institute, you need to build organizational capabilities. And when you have the right organizational capabilities, well, then you can perform beneficial learning analytics. And because you perform beneficial learning analytics, the learning will improve, or the learning environment will improve. So that's why it's important to focus on the business side as well. It's not just about learning, because, well, without those organizational capabilities, you can't perform beneficial learning analytics. So yeah, you need both sides. So I designed a capability model, which I show here, and I have a different slide here, and maybe you can now see it a bit better, in which we say, well, there are 5 categories of capabilities you need as an institution. So it's about data, it's about people, it's about technology, it's about management, and it's about privacy and ethics. And this capability model came from another literature review. And it's very interesting because we took literature on business analytics and big data analytics as well. And from those domains, in those domains, there was no mentioning of privacy and ethics at all, even though it was about healthcare and analytics. And yeah, you have, patients and patients' data, so you might want to think about privacy and ethics. But that was obsolete from those domains, and this is very specific for the learning analytics domain. Fortunately, I might want to add. So again, here you can say, oh, but where is the learning in this model? I mean, it's about people and it's about knowledge, but this is really about how to implement and support the uptake of learning analytics. But there are some links to that. I mean, stakeholder engagement and stakeholder identification. You really want to get students aboard. You really want to get teachers aboard. Make sure they are they are involved from the start on, because well, they know what they want. We can design a very nice dashboard and show it to students, and they say, well, yeah, it looks nice, but what do I need to do with it? It's not actionable. I don't know what I have to do now. I'm scoring very good or very bad. I don't know what intervention to perform. And the same goes for teachers. Also in the experiment we had with our dashboard, I showed it to teachers and they said, yeah, it looks nice, but what I have to do, I don't know. So make sure that teachers and students are involved from the start on. And on the management side, for example, there's strategy and there's policy and code of practice, and that goes about your vision on learning as well, and that depends from institution to institution. But you really want to think there about, all right, how do we want to teach our students? So yeah, learning is in this model, but I think it's an example that learning is often overlooked in learning analytics research. So now I'm trying to optimize this model and add the learning part to it as well. So when we go back to the aim of my PhD research, it's about enabling students and teachers to benefit from learning analytics. And that raises the question, when do they benefit? Well, ask somebody and they say, well, when the grades go up. But learning is more about just grades. And I know that in learning analytics literature, it's often about the grades because, I mean, they're easily measurable and they are easy to extract from your computer systems. But they are very, well, at least they are, at best, they are a proxy of learning. It's not only about grades. So how do we measure that learning analytics has beneficial effects on the learning? And I really needed to come up with an answer on this question before I could continue with my PhD research. Because when I implement the model I just showed, yeah, how do we know that it works? I mean, we have to measure something, but what are we going to measure? We had to get insight in those measures and those operationalizations first. So when we go back to Claude's learning analytics cycle, we're really looking at the top left corner there. So you perform an intervention, and what do we want to see next? What do we want to see that's happening? I mean, is the student going to look more at the videos, or are they posting more on the discussion board? Or we need to know what the effect is. So providing an answer to this question as part of my PhD research, in what way does existing learning analytics literature measure affected learning? There are so many articles out there about learning analytics. Well, we thought the answer should be in there somewhere. So I performed a systematic literature review in 7 relevant databases where much of the learning analytics literature is published. And we got over 1,000 hits on our search string, which included like learning analytics and effect and improvement and optimization and keywords like that. And that gave over 1,000 hits. So yeah, that took a lot of time to read through all the titles and abstracts and see whether it was really relevant for our research. And unfortunately, most of the time it was not, because in the end we only had like 38 key studies which actually described in what way those authors try to improve learning and how they measured it and report on the results. So we were looking for the more quantitative papers where they stated, all right, we try to optimize self-regulated learning, and now we have an experiment or a quasi-experiment or a case study, and we measured this and this measure, and now we see an effect. And so there were only 38 key studies doing that. And yeah, that was quite a shock. So most of the learning analytics literature is about other things. It's about a new algorithm or a new early warning system or things like that, but not about the actual effects on learning. Anyway, we continued with those 38 key studies and started to analyze them. So what are those measures for affected learning? And first of all, we had to come up with a categorization model to analyze the results. And we used this model from Biggs and Telfer, which is already over 30 years old, but still quite relevant. And from that, we deducted a classification scheme. So we looked at the student level and the departmental level. This distinction is also present in learning analytics literature, where there we speak about learning analytics on one hand and academic analytics on the other hand. So the academic analytics is more about the departmental side of things. But in literature that often overlaps. It's not always that clear that somebody is speaking about the real micro level, so in the course, at course level, at student level, or more the organizational level. So we made a distinction between that. And then we made a distinction between the process, so the learning focused activities, what the students are doing, or the performance, so the actual learning outcomes. Or so there you might want to think about grades, test scores, but also skills. But yeah, skills are very hard to measure, and we see that in literature then grades are often used as a proxy to show how well students did master their skills. So now we have this 2x2 classification scheme, and we analyzed the 38 key studies, and we came up with the following results. So when you look at the learning process, well, there is a variety of measures you can use, and things researchers try to affect in order to improve the learning. To give some examples, I mean, learning process is about the study time, the time students spend on studying, but also the time spent on solving questions or using tools, or how often did they post on the discussion board, things like that. So measures really reflecting learning activities. And not just outcomes, but also what do you need to do during a course. And there we saw, well, quite a variety of things. And all of them are good to and easy to measure. But when we look at student performance, well, that was the thing most of the researchers looked at. And here you already see that the grades and the test scores, they are the usual suspect, and they are used most often. to measure well, the effects of learning analytics. And I understand it's easy to do so. This metric we all have available in our systems. And when you look at, for example, discussion board posts, yeah, this one is hard to get. You have to count in some way, or you have to extract the data and have a small program which can do, for example, network analysis. And yeah, that takes a lot of time and effort before it's properly working. But when you look at grades, well, you just make an export of your grading system and then you have it. And then you combine it with a student ID and, well, you can analyze it. So yeah, this one is most often used. And in this category, you can see different scores as well. So, for example, the last one, the score of a game. And here, the authors they used a game instead of looking at other course materials, and they used the score students got to say, well, we improved learning with our learning analytics. So this is all on the student level, but when we go further, and then we can also look at the departmental level. And here we look at the learning environment. So with learning environment, you have to think about teachers most of the time. We see most of the research that the learning environment equals the teacher, and supporting teachers well, to better perform their job. So you can think about the number of messages sent by a teacher in a digital learning environment, students who were struggling or had a problem, or in group work when there were some disagreements in the group, then a teacher can intervene digitally. But also the time it takes a teacher to assess a student in this particular research. They performed a learning analytics intervention and thereby reducing the time it took a teacher for assessment. And yeah, time is a luxury most of the teachers don't have. I'm a lecturer myself, and when I have to assess like 60 paper exams, yeah, it costs me like 2 days or 3 days maybe. Yeah, so when you can reduce that time, that's very nice. So this is also something you can achieve with learning analytics. And those researchers, they showed that I thought maybe like a 50% reduction in assessment time, and that's quite a lot. And when we move on in the departmental level, we end here at the departmental performance. And again, you can see grades, but those grades are not from individual students, but those grades are from groups of students. And you can look at each student for him or herself, but you can also draw conclusions over the entire group, which was done at this level. Other metrics we saw there were like the course completion rate, for example, and how many students did actually complete a course. And you can see this measure in MOOCs often, so the massive open online courses, where course completion is quite a problem because it's often very low. For us at my institution, course completion is not that much of a problem because here students, they have to follow all the courses. We have a fixed curriculum, so yeah, the student cannot say, well, I'm not going to do this course, but I pick another one. So this also shows that learning analytics is contextual. Not every measure is important for each context and each situation. Anyway, but these measures, they look at the more departmental level, and from a more the organizational perspective. And this is also something like management really wants to see. What is the re-registration rate, for example? We start with 300 students, and after 1 year, how many of them continue with their studies? Or the revenue you get from student enrollment. So overall, we had those 4 categories, and we saw that there is a broad variety of measures you can use to measure the effects of learning analytics. And it's not only about grades, as you can see, but they are used most of the time. And what was very interesting to see was that the measures not always align with the learning analytics objective. So we saw some research going on about the improvement of self-regulated learning. And then I think, well, that is really into the learning process. When you think about this part of the metrics, the SLR is here mentioned explicitly. So the self-regulated learning is where students plan and learn and assess and reflect on their own learning. But this was measured by the grade they got at the end. So the researchers tried to affect something from the learning process, but they measured it based on performance. And we believe that that's kind of a misalignment between what you really want to achieve and what you actually are measuring. And this does not occur that often, but yeah, you really have to think about that when you're performing learning analytics activities. What do we want the students to do, and does our metric reflect that behavior? So make sure they are from one and the same box in the model. And there were only a few studies focusing on the multiple categories. So on, for example, learning process and performance. And learning, I mean, it is a process. It's not only about the test at the end. We have courses of like 10 weeks. And yeah, when you're performing learning analytics, you want to measure all the time. So you want to measure during the process, and yes, of course, you want to measure at the end as well. But actually, you should focus on multiple categories, because just in time, it changes what you want to see. In the beginning, I want to know which students are actively busy with learning materials, or at least started with the course, starting reviewing the learning materials. And halfway, I want to measure how much they understood already and what additional steps they might want to take. And at the end, I want to measure whether they really understood all the materials and how they performed on the test. And so the questions you want to answer based on your learning analytics, they change during the learning process. So yeah, you really want to focus on multiple categories from the model. So this was the work from 2017, published in 2018, but as it often goes, the work continues. And in 2019, we performed an update. And luckily, there were additional key studies. So in total, we have 62 key studies now. So as you might recall, we started with 38. So it's almost 40% more key studies on the same search string. So that's good. In only 1.5 years, the amount of key studies almost doubled. So that's good. And we refined our classification scheme. And why did we do that? Well, when we look at the Biggs and Telfer model, the students factors, which we say, well, this is at the student level, well, it's about prior knowledge and it's about motivation, prior motivation. And those things you cannot affect with your learning analytics, because I can't change the past. When a student comes into my classroom, either physically or the digital classroom, I can't change what they know already. So yeah, I can use some learning analytics to test what their level is at the start, but I can't intervene on that anymore. So we said, well, that it's strange to have this factor still in the model. So now we focus on the learning environment, which is the teaching context in the Biggs model. And we said, well, we have a learning process in the middle where the students are actually learning and performing learning activities. And then at the end, we have the outcomes. And then we came up with this classification scheme with like 3 categories instead of 4. And when we look at it, we also try to cluster the different operationalizations we saw before, because yeah, sometimes they kind of overlap or they are kind of the same side of the coin, but not are exactly the same, but yeah, they are talking about the same topic. So there we start to cluster them into certain aspects you can see within this category. So the learning environment is really about the teacher awareness and the teacher productivity, and also about learning materials. So when you use learning analytics to optimize the learning environment, you might want to think about those 3 aspects. And yeah, you can use different operationalizations to do so. And with the learning process, there we see things like learner awareness and learning productivity, engagement, self-regulated learning, online activities and behaviors. So those show the real things students, how you can measure what students are doing during the learning. And yeah, so this really focuses on the process. And for me, those are the things you really want to focus on with learning analytics. I mean, this is where you can make a change. For example, as a teacher, and this is during learning, halfway your course. So here you can still intervene and see that students are going to perform better. And at the end, well, then we have the student performance, and there you can see the knowledge and skills they eventually got, and the learning gain, which is an interesting one. I mean, knowledge and skills is just about the score you get in the end, but the learning gain also measures it at the start. So yeah, this is interesting, and there you can really see, did a student learn something during the course? Did they go from like level 2 to level 10 or whatever scoring you use? And here we also see the more business or the departmental side, the academic success, and retention and dropout. So this is the updated model we have, which is unfortunately still under review, so I can't share it with you yet, but hopefully we can in the near future. So to come back at the question at the beginning of this presentation, where is the learning and in learning analytics, we can draw some conclusions. First of all, organizational capabilities are important for learning analytics uptake. I mean, we can't only focus on learning with learning analytics and learning analytics research. It's important to look at the organizational perspective as well, to the IT infrastructure, to have the right algorithms and the right systems. Yes, all of this is important. Without those, learning analytics can't be beneficial. However, learning analytics is and should be about the learning. In the end, it should benefit learners and it should benefit teachers. And as we saw from the literature reviews, there are many possible effects of learning analytics. It's not only about grades. I mean, there are so many aspects of learning you can measure. Please do. So let's move away from grades. Look about the online behavior. Look about self-regulated learning. Look about the number of changes students made to their product, whether it's a report or a presentation or a computer program they write. Really look at the process. Cross-categorial learning analytics provide a better view on learning. As I said, it's not only about outcomes and it's not only about learning process, but we should look at from the start to the end. And that means that you need cross-categorial learning analytics. You need different measures at different points of time. So this was the end of my presentation. I hope you learned something from it, and you're now have a better insight in how you can change learning with learning analytics. And feel free if there are any comments or questions to raise them now.
Justian, thank you. That is a fantastic presentation, and I'm very, very grateful to you. I'm going to ask people now, yes, and people are giving thumbs up as we speak, so thank you, Nigel. So people, if there are any questions, I understand that you can raise your hand by using the control at the bottom of the Collaborate. Or, if you like, maybe people can turn on their microphone. Does anyone have any questions or any comments or observations that they would like to share? While people are collecting their thoughts and coming up with some splendid questions, I actually do have one. In fact, I have a number, but I'm going to start with this one, Justian. I was quite interested in the steps that you went through in your analysis and the findings in the literature and what the learning analytics is privileging in its research foci. But I noted that you developed your classification scheme deductively. So, you know, adopting BIGS. And I'm just wondering, when you went through your 38 articles and subsequently going through your 62 in 2019, if you're able to speak to that, and if not, then ignore. If you considered exploring the themes in those papers even inductively, did you check that there wasn't a component of your model that might have been overlooked or was missing, or there was something that emerged that surprised you?
Yeah, that's always the problem, of course, when you have a model in advance and then you try to plot your data on that model, that things fall outside. But no, that wasn't really the case. I mean, we used the BIGS model and we extended those categories a bit. So yeah, all the findings fall within those categories. But we could really see those trends going on. And so when we were analyzing the data, we kind of immediately saw the different measures which were in there. So no, there were not really odd ones out, to say. But yeah, of course, there are things which are interesting to see. But also in the variety of a learning analytics application. I mean, I'm a lecturer at a university. I have this image of students sitting in front of me and doing their learning activities and online learning, and we can measure that. But learning analytics is applied for so much more than that, and we saw all kinds of interesting research going on different learning activities in classrooms, in online classrooms, but also outside, students walking through a city and doing assignments, or students sitting in a lab doing some kind of experiment, or students working in a computer lab, writing programs, and getting real-time feedback on that. So yeah, it's very interesting to see that learning analytics can be used for many, many different activities and opportunities.
Okay. Audience, any other questions? You can turn your microphones on, or if you're raising your hand, I'm unable to see actually. So that's a little bit unfortunate. Clara? Oh no. Okay. I'm going to extend my question then a little bit, because I liked very much, thinking about you in your presentation. You've referred to contextual elements. You've talked to learning as being a process. You've talked about I guess you've problematized learning outcomes, learning growth. Within the processes that you were focusing on, and also within environment, I was quite shocked by the sort of, I guess, limited focus in the teaching and learning environment, and what did you call it? Anyway, you know what I mean, teacher awareness materials and things. But pedagogy, and also, so I guess in a form of pedagogy, which is students working with others. So pedagogical methods, and that was something, and the role of design. So I guess I'm thinking about, in terms of contextual elements, the learning environment, the planned broader learning environment, that seems to be quite silent in this research.
Yes, it is. That might have to do with the criteria we had to include studies. We only included studies which actually reported on measures they used to optimize learning, and really use those measures. And I can imagine when you're, for example, designing a new course, or changing your course design, or that you don't really report on all those things in one study. So yeah, that might be something for which learning analytics is used. We do that. I mean, I look at my results from one year, analyze that, and use it to improve my course in the following year. But that might not be reflected in the studies we had. So yeah, this is just the side of a bit of a disclaimer that maybe people use it for that objective, but not really report on that. But I agree with you that sometimes, especially in the first round, the first study, we were a bit shocked that from so many articles on learning analytics, there were only so few describing the actual effects. So.
Yeah. Okay. Linda. Go.
I'm on a tram, so I don't know whether you can hear me, but I did a I have a question. Actually, I really like that point about the fact that we don't often see full studies in learning analytics, that we often see them broken up into bits because that's what the publishing model encourages. So do you think there are ways that we could invent a way that we could see full studies in more detail? That's maybe not a question to Justian, it could be to anyone.
Yeah, I think we can. I mean, you just have to broaden the way you search. The problem is that you get a lot of well, non-relevant results there as well. And we might want to look more at more practical research as well. For example, with our special interest group, we're now designing a learning analytics dashboard, and not in the way you think about it, but to show what learning analytics activities people of our institutions in the Netherlands are performing. So we send questionnaires to all the institutions, and we ask for what purpose do you use learning analytics, how do you measure this, what are the results, and we try to visualize that in a dashboard so we can see over the entire Netherlands. And yes, I know we're a small country, but it still looks great. So what are institutions doing? So then maybe we should not only look about the literature which is out there, because not all of the learning analytics practitioners are actually publishing scientific research, but also go and ask, what are you doing? So yeah, more a practical approach. So I hope that provides an answer to your question.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you.
We've just had a little contribution from Melinda. You in Bathurst or Sydney, Melinda? But anyway, Melinda's contributed here a little comment. Understanding the learning and teaching intentions in a context is so rich and must be understood through the disciplines. And I think it's interesting, isn't it, with learning analytics? I think we're becoming increasingly aware of this need to think about our different disciplinary and theoretical frames. Even in an interdisciplinary context, you've still got to be aware of your theoretical assumptions and premise. Now, Lisa and Melinda Lewis is still writing. Lisa, is that you, Lisa Lim? Oh, here we go. Cultures and contexts within, yes. Melinda, you can put your microphone on, by the way, if you'd like to.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go. And then we'll let Lisa speak. And hello, Lisa. Yes, go, Melinda.
Thank you, Cass. Yes, I think, that sort of tight acknowledgement and respect of the cultures and contexts in which the learning and teaching is intended and occurring really is very informative in terms of the data. And I just wanted to make a bit of a shout out. I know we all know it, but I just really wanted to highlight that and shout that out and actually appreciate the diversity of that and not stymie any of the diversity of that.
There is pressure sometimes, isn't there? I felt this very much from a management, when I worked in learning analytics management, to actually do exactly what you were saying, to stymie, so that you're getting a simpler, sort of more reduced storyline. It's hard to bring in the contextual complexities that you're referring to and that Justian commented on too. And it's
yes. So I just want to really pay tribute to those comments and really value that deep, rich contextual and cultural context, so that and not to be reductive, I guess, in this space.
We will all be wanting to see your dashboard, Justian.
Yes,
the one that you're now. Lisa's a dear colleague from Uni SA who I haven't spoken to for a while. Lisa, what would you like to make a comment about? maybe nothing.
Probably. Just
Yes, there you
I
are.
think, sorry. Mainly, I think, as Linda has also highlighted before, the importance of the learning design really to inform learning analytics. And yeah, that's what I just wanted to highlight.
Lisa, is that a space that you're working in at the moment? Are you starting to focus attention on learning design and how it shapes learning through a learning analytics approach?
I would say I didn't intend to go that way, but it looks like it's headed that way. So
Yeah.
I've looked at for context, and it does look like the way that the instructors have designed the implementations really is based on the course context, and so they have built feedback and support around the learning design in that aspect. And that's having some interesting effects on the students' perceptions as well as the way that they respond in terms of self-directed learning and even their emotions.
That's very interesting. Now, we've got 2 minutes to go, so I think now might actually be a really lovely time to wrap up. I'm just going to give the final shout out for anyone to ask a question, or we'll just leave it there for today. And thank you for that, Lisa. Well, Justian, I would like to thank you very much for waking up super early and in a wintry Europe to speak with us in our evening. We got the better time zones. So, and thank you for sharing your knowledge and your thinking and your very thought-provoking research with us. It's been wonderful. So thank you. You're getting lots of thumbs up.
Yeah, well,
And
that's a good signal, right? Yeah. You're welcome. It's thank you for providing me this opportunity to share some of the insights and results. Thank you.
Yes, and I'm going to ask you to press the red button to stop the recording.
Yes, I will do. All right.
Okay. Thank you, everybody who attended. It was wonderful, and have a wonderful, happy and safe Christmas, New Year break to you all. Thank you.